All right. Hi, my name is Amy Pavel, and I did this project with Dan Goldman, who used to be at Adobe but is now at Google, Björn Hartmann at Berkeley, and Maneesh Agrawala at Stanford. This project is about giving and receiving feedback on videos that you've already created. So suppose I'm creating a video like this Kickstarter video for a toy called a kendama. And here's just a little bit of that video. So after I've created this first draft of the video, I'd like to give some feedback to help me improve my edit. So sometimes I'm able to meet with my collaborators in person. So as the video author, I'll receive feedback from my collaborator, the video reviewer, while we are both gathered around a video player on the laptop. So in person, this video reviewer gets to give feedback by using the video player as an aid.
Should take this shot and move it over here. So maybe switch the two.
Okay.
Yeah. And then in this shot, I found the background kind of distracting, like this pole and these plants are really drawing my attention.
Mm-hmm. So other times when we can't meet in person, I have to send my collaborators the video over email, and then they'll typically email me back a list of comments. So using an email, the video reviewer needs to look up each timestamp, and they need to describe all of the visual changes they want to make in text. In addition, in emails, you typically use more formal language than you would when you're just having a conversation with someone. Finally, emails are just much slower, so I've sped this video up to 7 times the speed of the original video. We interviewed 4 practitioners who mentioned that though they really prefer in-person feedback, they actually receive feedback over email about 80% of the time. They preferred these in-person reviews because the reviewer can more efficiently communicate feedback using speech and demonstrations with the video player. In addition, they can use their body language and tone of voice to communicate more information about how they're interpreting the video. And practitioners received additional off-the-cuff comments that might not make it to a formal email. So though practitioners preferred email less, they used it often when they needed to communicate asynchronously. And there were also other upsides too. Mainly, there was added efficiency for the video author. So the author would typically make a to-do list anyway to refer to later, so this way it's already done for them. And there's a documentation of the feedback process, so that after the video author finishes each point of the email, then their job is done. So we wanted to combine the positive aspects of both of these methods to create a new system for providing and receiving feedback over asynchronously. So we created VidCrit. VidCrit consists of 2 interfaces, a feedback recording interface and a feedback viewing interface. The feedback recording interface is used by the video reviewer to record their feedback on the video, and the feedback viewing interface is used by the video author to watch the feedback and navigate it. So I'll talk about both of these interfaces in turn, starting with the feedback recording interface. The recording interface allows the reviewer to record speech feedback. It also records the reviewer's webcam video, their time in the source video, and any mouse movements they might make over the source video itself. We also record all interactions with the aligned source video transcript. So using this interface, the reviewer can record comments just by scrubbing in the video.
So it's only limited by the scope of your imagination.
Take this shot and move it here.
In addition, they can give comments about visual attributes of the video using mouse movements over the source video.
The pole in the background here is distracting.
Finally, they can use the source video transcript to both navigate the source video or to leave comments about the script.
And I think we should maybe reword this sentence, make it a little more exciting.
So this interface preserves a lot of the benefits for the video reviewer. It lets the reviewers comment efficiently as they would in person, and it also records their body language and tone of voice. But they're still able to give feedback asynchronously, which they can't do in person. So how are we going to show the video author this recorded session? The most straightforward thing to do would be to just show the author the recording of the screencast of the recording. But searching and browsing comments within this raw screencast is pretty difficult. First, these screencasts tend to be really long. And this length comes from the time that the reviewer is just sort of sitting there silently watching the video, not saying anything. In addition, the comments are non-linear with respect to the source video, because the reviewer will often just jump around the video to make comments as they watch it. So even though the screen recording documents the session, it's not efficient compared to simply reading the email comments. So to help reviewers search and navigate the feedback session, we created the feedback viewing interface. The feedback viewing interface consists of two panes, the direct navigation pane on the left and the segmented comments pane. Using this list of transcribed and automatically segmented comments in the segmented comments pane, authors can skim and browse the feedback session. So I'll zoom into a couple of these comments. Each of these transcribed comments are segmented by issue so that each comment corresponds to a new problem. So in this case, the first comment says, the poll in the background here is distracting, and then the second comment is about rewording a sentence to make it more exciting. In addition, clicking on any one of these comments navigates to the corresponding location in the feedback session. So first, I'll click on a comment that says, this is a nice use of slow motion in this shot here.
It's a nice use of slow motion in this shot here.
And I'll click on another about the changing focus in the shot.
Focus is pretty weird in this shot. It seems to be changing a lot, and it's a little distracting.
Okay, so now that I've talked about the segmented comments pane, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about this direct navigation pane. So the direct navigation pane displays the source video and the reviewer's webcam video. And video authors can navigate the feedback session using the feedback session timeline. I'll zoom into this timeline a little bit more. So when I click play on this feedback session, you'll see the source video jump around a bit. You'll notice, so it will play back both the source video and the reviewer's comments, but you'll just see the image move.
It's only limited by the scope of your imagination.
Take this shot and move it here.
So the source video is jumping around because the video reviewer is actually scrubbing in the source video as they make the comment. So we show the source video timeline and the reviewer's playhead at all times. So when I play this again, we'll see the scrubbing reflected in the source video timeline.
It's only limited by the scope of your imagination.
Take this shot and move it here.
The feedback timeline also displays when the reviewer speaks a comment using these colored bars. The color of the bar corresponds to what part of the source video the comment is about. So this light green bar at the end actually corresponds to a comment at the beginning of the source video, whereas this darker blue color corresponds to a comment somewhere in this section. So I'll talk more about how we go from the recorded review session to this segmented list of comments in the viewing interface. So this involves transcribing and aligning, then segmenting the session. So from the recording interface, we get the webcam video and the interaction metadata. To enable text-based interactions, we transcribe the video using rev.com, a crowdsourced transcription service, and then we align every word in the video to each word in the transcript using prior work. We end up with a really long block of text with all of the comments chained together. But it's really difficult to skim and browse this text to watch individual comments. So we want to segment the session. So one thing we could do to segment the session would just be to use the sentence boundaries. But sometimes multiple sentences correspond to the same topic. So in this case, the light blue sentence and the purple sentence actually both talked about an oversaturated background. So we use a machine learning approach, and in addition to punctuation, we take into consideration things like the pause and the reviewer's speech before they start a new comment, and the time since they performed a scrubbing or play interaction with the video player. So after using this method, we get our list of segmented comments. So I'll talk about the evaluation of the segmentation algorithm first, and then go on to the evaluations for each interface individually. So starting with segmentation, we measured precision, or how many of the predicted segments were true predicted segments, and recall of all of the possible true segments, how many did our algorithm actually find. We found our segmentation algorithm performs better than our baseline, which was a weighted random assignment along the sentence boundaries. In most cases, we correctly identify segments. That is, in this case, there are two segments, and each segment corresponds to a different issue. So the first one is about the poor audio quality, and the second one is about a script that needs rehearsing. But sometimes we incorrectly identify boundaries. So in this case, we've generated 3 segments, but each of these comments is actually just about one issue, which is the video needs a conclusion. So this type of mistakes lowers precision, and in user studies, users would typically correct this by deleting the extra segments. Other times, we fail to recognize a segment boundary, so that one comment actually corresponds to multiple issues. In this case, there's wind in the background, and there's wind in the background, and the speaker is making some awkward movements. These false negatives are annoying because users can't navigate to just one of these comments, and they have to listen to both played back. So in the next revision of our interface, we'd like to include a split function. So to evaluate our feedback recording interface, we conducted a user study to find out, is the feedback recording interface more efficient for the video reviewer than when using text? We recruited 8 participants, and each participant reviewed one video using the recording interface and one video using a text document alongside a video player. To analyze the feedback, we transcribed and manually segmented the comments into individual issues. We found that using our feedback recording interface, users generated an average of 22 unique comments, and using the text interface, they only generated an average of 10 comments. This supports that video reviewers could communicate the feedback more efficiently with the recording interface than they could using text. So moving on to our feedback viewing interface, we wanted to know if the segmented comments were useful, and we wanted to know if the authors would consider using the viewing interface instead of just their regular email comments. So we recruited 4 video authors, and during the informal evaluation, each participant used the feedback viewing interface to view and interpret the reviewer's suggestion into a list of changes to make in the next revision. We observed strategies and recorded interaction data while the authors used the interface. So what did we learn? So the video authors could have just browsed the screencast using the timeline, but instead they read and navigated using the segmented comments. Quantitatively, we recorded the navigation clicks and found while they only navigated using the timeline around 15 times, they used the segmented comments around 300 times total. In addition, authors rated our viewing interface as preferred or strongly preferred over email in their past experiences. And the reason for this was that our viewing interface actually provides more context than an email does. So in an email, you might need to look up each timestamp to figure out what the reviewer is talking about, but in our interface, the context comes along with the comment. So overall, VidCrit allows reviewers to record their spoken comments as they would in person, while our machine learning approach and viewing interface let the author receive an enumerated and sorted list of comments. In the future, we would like to address some open questions. So we focused on receiving feedback from just one collaborator. But in reality, users might sometimes receive feedback from multiple collaborators at once. In the future, we would need to figure out a way to distinguish between reviewers in our interface and let users navigate the session, which brings up the question of how we would group together comments that actually talk about the same thing, using probably topics and the time they correspond to in the video. Second, we focus on the case of asynchronous collaboration, but the interface would also be useful for documenting synchronous conversations about video. One reason this is challenging is that the video author will likely discuss some of the changes with the reviewer. So our segmentation algorithm doesn't take into account speaker at all, and we would also need to group together some relevant parts of this conversation and present reasonable summaries in the interface. All right, thank you, and I will take any questions.
Great talk. Any questions from the audience? There's one hand over there.
Hi, great talk.
Thank you.
I have a question in the last slide when you mentioned multiple reviewers. I was thinking in the case when you have a more iterative approach with the reviewer, when, you know, they propose a change, you made something, then it goes back, then it's like, no, I prefer the last version. How do you manage this evolution on the changes?
Yeah, so right now, that's a great question, and right now we don't really do much for it. You would sort of just create another review of the video and then review that one. But I think in the future it would be really cool to make some sort of different interface for reviewing video revisions, because we have sort of the comment and then the time it's tagged to, and we might be able to figure out from editing files or the video itself if people made changes.
Hi, I'm Forrest from University of Illinois. Great talk. I'm just wondering, it's kind of related to this question, but it's even simpler. Is there any mechanisms for the reviewers to review their comments within the same section? Like, if the reviewers decided to change their comments afterwards, is there any way to revise it?
Right now, there's not. So, I mean, basically what we would do is basically give the reviewers the feedback interface, and then they could go through and delete the comments that they didn't want to include. But I think in the future we could use prior work talked about in this session to maybe edit some of the comments or do something more in the recording interface itself, so you didn't have to go through that longer process.
Thank you.
Great question.
So we have time for one more question. Any questions from the audience? So it looks like one of the most obvious future work is that how do you incorporate multiple reviewers' comments and feedback? And I was wondering, I mean, do you have any thoughts on this? Would you consider like having individual feedback sessions, or do you revise your feedback session timeline and have an aggregated review session? Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I think the one thing that's most obvious is that the scale of the comments would just get really enormous pretty quickly, and so you would lose some of the benefit you get from this interface. So the first thing I would want to do is make sure that the segmented comments were sort of grouped together if they correspond to the similar issue, which often would happen. And then another thing is that I think you brought up a good point that navigating in those timelines with all of those reviewers would be a little bit difficult. So I think we would need to work through that a little bit more. Yeah.
So this concludes our session. The presenters have shown us how to make delicious pork rib videos, to how to critique our colleagues. Thank you very much for all the great talks, and